Hey everyone, Zach here, and welcome to the 65th lesson of this RTS tutorial series. In this video, we'll finish the Fog of War and, most likely, this section as well. I say most likely because if there are any fixes, besides those related to unit selection, we will address those fixes first. If there are not any other fixes, we'll move on to setting up the AI that will help automate the player's side and add greater depth to our units. Before we get into the tutorial proper, I am going to show you what the decal version of the Fog of War looks like. While you watch that, start up your project and we'll get started shortly.
So I just wanted to show you what the decal version looks like. You see we have 6 units. They all have a little bit of light around them. That's their detection area. Just going to grab one of these units. And as we move it up, you see it detects another unit. You can even see the fog is changing. And this system just works a little bit better than the current system we're using. Yes, there's a bug where the decal didn't get erased, I realize. But yeah, this is an example of how the decal setup would work. Welcome back to the editor, and we can see our lovely dark Fog of War here. I'm going to change one thing from the last video. I'm going to set this back to 620. And the reason I changed in the last video was because we could see the health bar up there for the building. However, that building is going to reduce the fog in that area, so it doesn't really matter all that much. Now, I also am going to add one more thing into our BP Fog of War. Before I do that, I'm going to open up our materials, and I'm going to go to my subtraction of fog. And in here, I just want to make sure I have the right name. It's draw size. I'm going to copy that name because there was actually 2 things I needed. I needed draw location and draw size. I only did draw location. So back to our blueprints. Let's go to our Fog of War. Let's open up the Fog of War. And in here, we're just going to break this for a moment. And we are going to duplicate this Fog of War here. Or sorry, this fog subtraction. And we're going to set scalar parameter value. We're going to plug the execute into there. Line that all back up. Paste the parameter name of draw size. Apparently I have the wrong thing, so I did Control W. So go back into here. You can just type in draw size. I'm paranoid I'll type it in wrong, so I'm just copying and pasting. Align those up. Make sure all these are lined up. Put Fog of War in there nicely, and then reattach this at the very end. Now, you could, of course, just use one fog of subtraction bit here and just tag them all into the right spots. I think the lines cross too much for it to be neat and pretty. Going to pull this back a tiny bit. That way I have a little bit of room. And I'm going to take this value here and I'm going to plug it into our subtract fog. Or subtract from fog, so we have a new pin. And I'm just going to put a couple of reroutes in, just so it's easier to see where everything is going. Alright, that takes care of what we need to do for our Fog of War in terms of setting it up to reduce the size. So we need to get 3 blueprints open. We're going to open all 3 of them. That's going to be our building master, which we'll do last. We're going to need our unit master. And we're going to need our vehicle master. Start with our unit master, just because that one is the easiest. Or actually, not the easiest. It's the most technically complex, but it's the easiest to guide people through. And we are going to create a new event at the very bottom, or you can create it elsewhere if you want, but so first comment this out as support. Sorry, I'm going to change the name to support unit events. That way I keep the same naming convention for my comments. Alright, so I'm going to take all these special events we have and just move them so they're in clusters together. I'm going to do them in clusters of 4, I think. There we go. And then the harvester, since it has 3 events, will just stand right there. I like how that's set up now. Move them there. Actually, move them out there. There we go. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to right click, and this is the first. Actually, it's the second step now, really, but it's the first major step in reducing our Fog of War. So we'll do clear fog, and we're going to do this 3 times, once in each of these blueprints. I'm just going to move this back up a tiny bit so we don't have such a huge space. And from this fog of war, what we're going to do is we're going to do a line trace by channel. We're going to leave it on visibility for now. We might change this and add in a new line trace. And before I forget, I'm going to click Trace Complex. Otherwise, I will forget. And I'm going to split both of these structures. Okay, maybe I did move these too close. There we go. And our start and end points will be in the X and Y values only. We're going to ignore the Z. It's going to be based on where the actor is located, so where the unit is located. So right-click, type in Get Actor Location. And in here, we're going to split this structure as well. You could also pull off and do a break. And we're going to plug the X into the X, of course. And the X into the other X. And the Y's into the Y's. Now, I said we're going to leave the Z's. That's not entirely true. What we're going to do is we're going to actually hard code some numbers in. We're going to put it at 700, so it's a little bit larger or longer than the fog is placed. Remember, the fog is now at 620. All right, you want to know if it actually hit something that's valid. So we're going to grab off of this return value here, and we're going to check, is this valid? If it is, then we are going to want to start reducing our fog. The way we're going to do that is we're going to grab off our hit here, and we're going to break our hit result. And just because I know I'm going to need to come off of this or something else, we're going to grab a reroute. And from the hit result, we want to know, did we hit an actor that is valid? So is valid with the question mark, so we have the built-in true false is valid there. So this is just, we need these checks just to make sure we're hitting the right thing. Yes, you could reduce the number of checks we're doing, but it does save some headaches in case things go wrong. Put a couple of reroutes in here, or one reroute. There we go. Grab off of here, and we're going to cast to our fog of war. Now, if the cast works, that means we've hit the fog. If it doesn't, we've hit something else, or there is something really wrong in the design. Off of our as fog of war, we're going to do subtract from fog, and the value here, this conversion value, is going to come from our hit result. Now, if you didn't do the final step of allowing find collision by UV in your settings, go back and do that now, or this will not work. Drag off of this and type in find collision UV. And we're going to pass that value into there. We are going to leave this value as the default value from our material, which is 0.01. There you go. Compile and save. Now it's done. Let's actually call this up. The way we're going to do that is go back up to the top here, and at the event begin play, we're going to create a new timer. Yes, you could do this off tick if you wanted, but think about everything we have to do if you do it off tick, given we've already put things on tick in other blueprints. It's just easier to create a new timer. Also, it's technically better. And I'm going to take... Oh, yeah, that birthday check. We still have to fix that at some point, don't we? Oh, no, or you did fix it, maybe. Yeah, we fixed it already. I don't know why I thought we had to still fix it. Let's move this elsewhere. We're just going to move this down here for a moment. Okay, so let's grab all of this. Let's move this over a bit, just so we have a little bit of room. Grab off of here, and we're going to do set timer by function name. Now, we could also do the other ones we've done before, which were set timer by event, which is what I did for a lot of the earlier stuff. If you notice recently, I switched over to using the function name one just because it's slightly simpler to use. And we're going to set this function to our clear fog. So let's go back up here. Clear fog. I just spelled clear wrong. This is why I copy and paste the names in. Clear fog. And now I'm paranoid that that wasn't actually an uppercase F. It is. So say my naming conventions tend to be Pascal case. It's looping. It's going to loop every 0.01 seconds. So now we can test this out. If we hit play, we should have holes in our fog where our units are. Now if we move our units, if I can select a unit. So you notice I can't select a unit. That's going to be our third step in this video, which is changing the channel. In fact, before we go forward, let's do that now, actually. So I'm going to mark this as the third step in the comments below, and then we're going to go back to step 2, which will be doing the vehicle and the building. So the way we're going to do that is go back to your main window, go to your settings, open your project settings, and in your project settings, go to input. Sorry, not input. I completely lied to you. Go to your collisions. In your collisions, you are going to want to add in a new channel we're going to check. And the channel we're going to check is a trace channel. And that's going to be, we're going to have an ignore on that. And it's going to be our fog channel. So accept that. Go to your blueprint fog of war. Go to your fog. We are going to set this to custom. It will be world static. It will be query only, no physics collision. So it's going to be custom, query only, no physics, world static. And we're going to, in this, set everything in here to ignore. So just click ignore. The only thing it's not going to ignore is the fog. We're just going to set that to block just to be on the safe side. We're going to hit compile, hit play. Now you notice that we've lost the fog, so let's go back to our unit master, or lost the opening. In our line trace, we're going to change this to fog. Hit play now. You notice the gaps are back in. We can select our unit and we can move it, and it's subtracting from the fog as it moves. Here we go. All right, so going back to step 2 now, I'm just going to Control S save everything. We are going to repeat this process in our vehicle. And the vehicle one's really, really easy. All we're doing now is we're going to take all of these nodes. We're going to Control C them. We're going to go to our vehicle, and we're going to get rid of the on manufacturer. We're going to go down somewhere down here. And we're going to make sure there's something in the way. We're going to right click and do custom event, clear fog. There we go. Paste the event in. And again, everything's going to remain the same. Nothing in this one is any different than the unit. Now, again, we need to call this somehow. So I'm just going to grab all of this stuff. And I'm just going to move it down a tiny bit. In fact, everything should be over a little bit. There we go. And I'm going to move this over a bit too. If you know why I'm moving it over, I want it on the darker line there just so I knew where it was at. Going to take all of these nodes minus the sequence and move them further out. That way it doesn't overlap. Add a new pin in, and it'll be set timer by function name. And again, this will be clear fog. It will be every 0.01 seconds. It will be looping. Let's compile it. Let's put a vehicle onto our map. I'm just going to find a spot where there's nothing on the map. I'm going to put it near the spawn in of the resources. Hit play. Let's zoom out. Let's move back, and there's our vehicle. Let's make sure it's clearing as it moves. There we go. It is clearing our fog as it moves. Awesome. Now comes the tricky one, and the one that really shows some of the limitations of the fog of war, our building. I'm calling this all step 2. I'm probably going to label the building as step 4 in the description down below. I haven't decided yet. You'll know when you see the description. So the building is going to be a bit different, and it does, again, highlight some of the limitations of this approach to fog of war. If you notice in the decal version I showed at the very beginning of this video how it looks, you can translate anything over into that. Buildings, units, everything works the same, because the way the object orientation is set in that is there's one set of math. You're just plugging in values based on a variable set in each of the objects that can reduce a fog of war setting. All right, so let's go to our building master. And let's see, these are our factory related functions. So I'm just going to comment them as factory for now, and I'm going to move them over here. Oop, that's not what I meant to do. I'm going to just move it next to that one. So it'll be common to all buildings, but I'm going to do it outside of the common for now. I'm going to do a custom event. Like all our custom events in this series, it's going to be clear fog, or in this video that is. And let's go back to let's actually take all of this for now. All of this is going to remain the same for the most part, so let's copy it again. Let's paste it back into here, so into our building master. Let's plug into there. What's going to be different is we are going to set a value this time, and we're going to clamp that value. So grab your entry point, because it's actually slightly bigger than the building. I like the fog clearing more than just the building mesh. And we're going to get world scale. Now, from this get world scale, what we're going to do is we're going to split this structure. We're going to just move that a little bit further over. And we are going to add these values together. So we're going to do float plus float, and we're going to add our x and y values together. And line that up. And then we're going to clamp this, because if we don't clamp it, we're going to run into issues. So we're going to clamp float. All a clamp does is say, whatever value's in here, it can't be less than the minimum, and it can't be more than the maximum. Our minimum is going to remain 0.0. Our maximum is going to be let's try with 0.1. I was playing around with 0.08 earlier, and I like that one. I don't know why my test file has 0.1 in it right now, but let's just try that one. If this doesn't work, I will reduce that to 0.08. Now we have to call this up again, so let's go back into the top here at the begin play, and we're going to call this one slightly differently. Buildings do not move. We do not need a timer. We only need this to fire when the building is built. So there are 2 points, and the reason why we do that, and actually let me show you why we do it that way. So we're going to do something that's wrong to begin with. I'm just going to pull off of this bind event here and do clear fog. All right, it's going to look like it's going to work. Just trust me, it isn't really. We hit play. We can see it's reducing a large swath around each building. You can also see a bit of the limitation I was talking about earlier, but I'll get into that in a minute. I'm going to hit factory, and you notice it cleared a big spot right there. The reason it cleared this big spot, this is 0, 0 where that tree is. That's the center point of this clearing that we're getting. What's happening is when we spawn in a building preview, it's spawning in, remember, this actual building, but an unconstructed version of it at 0, 0, destroying it, and then attaching one to the mouse as it passes the information along. So what we need to do is we only want this to happen when the building is built. So anything that's placed on the map will go through this bit if it's built. And then when we place something on the map, we're going to control W this down here. We do on spawn. Plug that in. Hit compile. Hit play. And you notice we still have those cleared spots. We hit factory again. Notice it doesn't reduce anything. But if we place it on the map, it clears that area of the map out, and we can send engineers there. Now, you might have noticed that it looks different around this unit as compared to around the outskirts of these buildings. And yes, that is one of those limitations. In fact, if we move the unit through, you can see that until you get towards the very center of where these two things actually are at, that it's a different shade. And the reason for that is if we close that out, I'm just going to show you something really cool we can do to test things. Go to your M subtraction of fog. Let's open up this draw size for a minute, and let's open up this divide. So you see that little white dot there? That's the white dot that's being drawn onto the map. That's what's clearing out that fog. Let's set this at 0.0. Let's set this 0.1. You notice the gray is now a different color, and you notice that dot is bigger, and the center is where it's the darkest, and outside it gets a little bit lighter, sorry, the center is where it's the lightest, the most white, and the outsides are a little bit more gray. Not sure how well you can see that in a video, even zoomed in all the way. That is why there's that difference. We're setting our draw size different for our buildings. So it's giving us a bit of that effect. And unfortunately, again, with this setup, there's not much you can do about that. You can, with the decal setup, resolve that issue. So that's that little white dot. I'm not sure how easy that is to see on this recording. Sorry. Just want to make sure everything is set back. It is. Okay, Control S, save everything. Now that takes care of setting up our reduction. Now, we still have an issue, though, of if we zoom in, we can zoom under, and if we pan at the right angles, we can pan right through the fog. Now, again, the decal version, this isn't so much of a problem. So how can we resolve that? We can resolve that by, again, changing where we place our player start. So let's find our player start. Let's just move this above the fog. Let's set this at 650. Let's see what happens. Let's see if this actually works. We can still zoom through because the pawn itself is all the way down there. So that doesn't really help us. So let's reset our setting there. Let's go to our player. Let's go to our player controller. And, oh, sorry, I lied. I was just going to go to our player controller. Yeah, let's get our pawn open first. We will need our player controller as well. Let's pin the pawn in there. We'll start with our pawn. Do not know why I saw this floating movement. We're not using it anymore. So yeah, besides moving the floating pawn, the one thing I want to do in here is I want to go up to my collision settings real quick. I just want to change fog to overlap. Just makes life a little bit easier. Now, to really take care of the problem, we need to go to our player controller. We need to go to our event graph. We need to go to something from the very first section. All of our zoom and our pan settings. So in our zoom, we're going to set the minimum zoom to 650. We're going to go over to our pan settings, and we're going to set this to -15 and 30. Compile, and let's test this out. Make sure this actually works. Hit play. We're going to zoom out, zoom in. I'm zooming in as far as I can go. I'm going to pan, no problem. I'm going to zoom in and I'm going to pan. Ooh, looks like our number wasn't quite right. So as you can see, that number quite didn't work. Now, there are two ways to fix this. We can change these numbers, which is what we're going to do, or we can change the min zoom until we get a number that works. I just prefer changing this to 0 and 10. That is the simplest solution. Now, with the decal version of this, you don't need to worry about this issue because it's a decal. It's over everything. The camera isn't going to be affected by it. So that takes us through our basic fog of war setting and shows you how you can start setting things up, how you can subtract and reduce the fog mesh, how this is happening in real time, and takes us through setting up our camera controller to work with it. I believe at this point that we are finished with this section unless I find any major errors that I've overlooked already. Because I'm recording this a couple of days, actually about a week in advance of the video coming out, that gives me time to check. If I don't find any major errors, what we're going to do is we're going to move on to section 8, which will cover our player. Oh yeah, there is that issue, which I still haven't found a fix to, but we'll take care of that in some when we can. But we'll move on to section 8, which will be our AI for at least our player, and then we'll take care of our enemy and the AI we want to use there. All of that said, if you've enjoyed this video, make sure to hit the like button down below, and make sure to hit the subscribe and notify icon so you know when the next tutorial is out. As always, I look forward to seeing you in the next video, and I hope that you have a wonderful day.